Hello everybody, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Ed Puzzle Lecture Notes. Today we're going to finish off ecology, and we're going to look at some ways that humans, like you and I, we are humans, we are Homo sapiens, how do we screw up ecosystems? How do we damage environments that make it bad for the natural plants and animals that are trying to live out there? And this first thing we're going to go over is called eutrophication. Eutrophication. That's the process by which nutrients, which usually are good, nutrients are good, you got to have nutrients, gradually build up within an ecosystem. And we're almost always talking about lakes. Lakes are where nutrients, especially things like nitrogen and phosphorus. So if you go to Home Depot or something and you buy some fertilizer for your plants, what are they going to have in it? They're going to have phosphorus and they're going to have nitrogen, because plants need that stuff to grow. They need that fertilizer, the nitrogen and phosphorus. Well, right here you can see a normal lake. This is a normal lake. Looks nice and blue, nice clear water. Remember, lakes get their water from rivers that dump the water into the lake. Well, those rivers don't just dump water into the lake. They're also picking up sand and dirt and soil, and they're dumping that in the lake also, but they're also picking up nutrients. They're picking up nitrogen and phosphorus. So for example, let's say there was a farm up here, and there's a river running through the farm, and that farmer is fertilizing his crops. Well, that fertilizer is going to go down into the river and then make its way into the lake. Well, that can be bad, because if there's a lot of these nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus inside that lake, now the lake can go from this beautiful blue water that you would love to swim in to this over here, where algae, which is they're close, they're kind of like a plant, but they're not. Algae can just start growing like crazy. And that's what eutrophication is. That is where there's too many nutrients in the water. Too many nutrients, and algae just grows out of control. You can see this in my saltwater aquarium all the time. If I don't change the water often enough to get rid of all the nutrients from the fish food and from the fish droppings when the fish go to the bathroom in the water, those nutrients build up and algae will start to grow on the glass. So that's why I got to change the water. So that's what eutrophication is. It's the gradual buildup of nutrients within lakes that make algae grow out of control. So basically, eutrophication, the buildup of nutrients, makes lakes go from looking like this to looking like that. And obviously, if you're going to visit a lake, you'd rather it look like this. If you were a fish, you would rather the lake look like this. You would not want the lake to look like that. And that is what's called eutrophication. All right, so in your guys' group projects, you guys should have all included this into your slides, but different categories or classes of resources. The first one is called renewable resources. Renewable. I'm not going to put soil in there, but things like timber, those are trees. Wildlife, like deer, cattle, chickens, things like that, those are renewable because they can be renewed, or you can make more of it at the same rate they are used. I mean, like Kentucky Fried Chicken. We've been eating chicken from Kentucky Fried Chicken for, 50, 60 years. Why have we not ran out of chickens? Well, the reason is because chickens are a renewable resource. Guess what? If you eat a chicken, you could always make new chickens. That's a renewable resource. Now, the opposite of that are non-renewable resources. Those are things like fossil fuels like oil and minerals like, say, gold or any kind of metal. Fossil fuels, can we make more of it? Yes, the earth can make more fossil fuels, but it will take thousands and thousands, if not millions of years to do it. So if you're there at the gas station waiting to fill up your car with gasoline, if the earth is out of oil and cannot make more gasoline, you're not going to wait at the gas station for 100,000 years to fill up your car with gas, because oil and gasoline is non-renewable. We cannot make it fast enough. We can't make it fast enough at the rate they are used. And the last class of resources, inexhaustible resources. I don't really like this because as far as the planet, the biosphere, water is an inexhaustible resource. We will never run out of water. No matter how much water you drink or how much water you give your plants, you never get rid of water because remember, water is recycled. You know, evaporation, precipitation, and it evaporates again. It keeps getting recycled, but in areas like California, water is definitely not inexhaustible because we run out of water pretty quick. But also like air, you know, don't hold your breath, you know, because you think we're going to run out of air, run out of oxygen. No, we won't. Plants continue to put oxygen into the air for us to breathe. So those are inexhaustible resources. All right, so now that we know about kind of what resources are, those are things that people use, food, we use things like lumber right there, trees. But how do we use them? So these are approaches to using the resources. And you have your two extremes. You have exploitation, exploiting the resource, and you have preservation. Well, the first one is exploitation. And we'll use the example of trees. If you're exploiting the resource, you're using it with no or little or ineffective attempts to recycle the resource. Basically, when you're exploiting it, you're cutting down every tree in sight and you're not trying to replant new trees. Now, obviously, we need trees to build houses, to make the paper that you guys write on. You guys love to take notes and stuff. We need trees to make that paper, so we need it. But exploitation would be to cut down all the trees, and who cares about the trees? Now, the middle ground is conservation. That's like the middle. So we're going to still use the trees. We're going to use the resource, but we're going to recycle the materials when possible. So basically, we're not going to cut down all the trees. You know, we might cut down some of the trees, but not all. And when we cut them down, hey, how about this? How about grow some more trees? How about plant some more trees so there'll be some more trees in the future? And the other extreme would be preservation. And preservation is where basically, if we're talking about trees again, this is where they're saying, no more cutting down trees in this area. These trees are going to be totally preserved. The resources are not going to be used at all. They're going to be left intact. You're going to totally leave them alone. So you have the extreme of exploitation. You use the resource, whether it's trees or fish or water, whatever, and you don't care what happens. You're just going to use as much as you want, as much as you need. Conservation. You use the resource, but you use it responsibly. So you use only as much as you need, and you try to replace what you've taken, what you've used. And then the other extreme is preservation. That's where you do not use the resource at all. You leave it intact. You leave it totally natural. All right, so some approaches to using resources. So this is how humans, some countries use resources, and this is also how humans screw up ecosystems. So a lot of you guys picked deforestation as your way that humans disrupt ecosystems. Well, this would be, kind of an example of this. Obviously, there used to be a bunch of trees here and a bunch of animals that rely on those trees, birds, squirrels, chipmunks, whatever. They rely on those trees. Since those trees are now gone, those animals are going to have to move away back to where there's some trees. Now, like I said, we do need trees. We need wood to make some products. But the problem is we're cutting down so many trees faster than the trees can actually regrow. And sometimes the areas, they never regrow. Now, one little interesting fact is that while you're in this class, about an hour and a half, the size of about 4,320 football fields will be cut down or burned. 4,320 football fields worth of trees will be cut down just while you're in class. Now that is a lot of animals that are being disrupted. Their habitat is being ruined. So those animals are either going to die or they got to move out. Well, how do we do it responsibly? How do we use conservation? Remember, conservation is using the trees, but using it responsibly. And that's the same thing as what's called sustainable development. Sustainable, so we don't run out of trees. So what do we do here in the United States? We harvest only mature trees, only old trees. So we let the young trees get bigger before we chop them down. We replant new trees. So if you chop one down, hey, plant a new one. We also find new tree varieties that grow faster and are less prone to disease. So remember, sustainable development is basically the same thing as conservation. It's using the trees without totally wiping them out, without totally wiping out the ecosystem where all the animals die in the area because there's no more trees there anymore. The same thing can be said for fishing. I don't know how many of you guys fish, but I live at Del Lago, and there's Del Lago Pond here, and they allow kids to fish there. I don't know how many fish you can keep, but there is a limit. I don't know if it's 5 or 10, whatever. There's a limit on how many fish you can keep. If there was not a limit, and there's like 50 people out there fishing, and they can keep 100 fish, guess what? Eventually Del Lago is going to have no fish. Well, it's the same thing with the ocean. I know you guys think, oh, the ocean's so big, you'll never run out of fish. But look at this. In the last 10 years, the population of North Atlantic cod, haddock, and flounder have declined or gone down by 95%. That's because they're taking way too many fish out of the ocean. If they continue to do that, those species of fish will eventually go extinct. Us humans eat more fish than all the sharks and all the other animals in the ocean combined, and it's not even close. We take way too many fish out of the ocean. But how do we use conservation? How do we use sustainable development? How do we make sure that the fish don't completely disappear? Well, we regulate fishing seasons. So you can only fish at certain times of the year. So it gives the fish a chance to reproduce, have babies to make more fish. There's also fishing limits. So you cannot catch all the fish that you want. There's a limit on how many fish you can catch. And they also grow fish in like special pens, and then they sell those to restaurants or whatever. So remember, sustainable development, that is conservation. That is using the fish in a way that it doesn't end up there being no more fish around. All right, now the use of fossil fuels, things like gasoline and oil. So how do we use sustainable development? How do we use conservation? So we use the resource responsibly. Well, we have things called, there's California emissions. Our state was really good. They were the first ones to put emission standards. So basically, if there's a truck going down the highway, it cannot look like that. Come on. Releasing way too many pollution into the environment. That's not good. We also have cleaner burning automobiles or cars. And now we even got some cars that are electric. Now, one of my second period students said that electric cars aren't totally clean because the electricity is usually produced by burning fossil fuels. And that student was 100% correct. Even though the electric car itself does not put out smog or exhaust like that, but the electricity is produced by burning fossil fuels. And there's also another way to reduce air pollution, alternative source of power, wind. They turn windmills, that produces electricity. That produces no pollution. Same thing with solar power, produces no pollution. All right, so the last slide. Biodiversity, hopefully you guys remember that. Bio means life, diversity means a variety. So that's the variety of organisms that live in an area or an ecosystem. Now, why is biodiversity important? Well, number one, it gives organisms and environment a better chance to survive in the event of a major disaster or a disease. For example, in 1845, in Ireland, they had one specific species of potatoes, and the Irish people were very dependent on that potato. Well, the bad thing was, that specific species of potato got a disease, and it basically wiped out all the potatoes in Ireland. Well, what happened? 1 million Irish people died. from starvation because all their potatoes died from that disease. Now, other countries in Europe, they had several different varieties of potatoes. They had biodiversity. They had a bunch of different species. So even though that one species of potato died, just like in Ireland, their other species did not die. They were resistant to that disease. Therefore, other countries in Europe weren't hit so hard. That's why biodiversity is important. So if there is a disaster or a disease, at least some of the organisms may survive. Another thing that's really important is, you can look it up, biodiversity, organisms, plants, and animals provide us with so many things. They provide us with, of course, food, industrial products, and medicines. So when you get sick, painkillers, antibiotics, heart drugs, antidepressants, anti-cancer medication, those almost all come from plants. So in South America, where they're chopping down the rainforest, who knows? There might be a plant down there that has a cure for cancer. But if we burn that plant down and that species goes extinct, we will never know. So these plants and animals give us good things. That's why it's important to make sure that they don't go extinct. And last, here's some of the ways that humans can reduce biodiversity. Remember, altering habitats, that's like deforestation, building a dam, building a freeway, building a city, covering up the organism's natural habitat, in order for humans to live there. Hunting species to extinction. Some of you guys did that for your project. Remember the dodo bird went extinct back in the 15 or 1600s. The buffalo almost went extinct in the United States because people were hunting them. Introducing toxic compounds, that's pollution. That's another way that humans can reduce biodiversity and screw up ecosystems. And the last one is, remember, introducing foreign species, invasive or non-native species, into environment. It's usually done on accident. People don't want to do this on purpose, but that's another way that humans can reduce biodiversity. All right, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.